Well, welcome back everybody, and boy do we have a doozy today. Technically, I have two doozies. The first, which is today's book, is The Winter Rose by Jennifer Donnelly, and whoa, I think this thing is like 700 pages. Yes, 700 pages. The second doozy is honestly just because I haven't reviewed it and it's been like 2 weeks, so we'll see how I get through that one. But The Winter Rose, if you saw my other review of her book, Revolution, I'm sorry, I am absolutely exhausted. It's gonna make it even harder to get through these reviews. I cannot wait. Hopefully I will be done. Ugh, crap, it's already 10:30. When did that happen? If you saw my review of her book, Revolution, you know I didn't think much of it. It wasn't bad, but I only liked basically half of it. I had read another book of hers, These Shallow Graves, which I thought was amazing. I honestly think that her strong suit lies in her historical fiction, which is what this is. And it honestly blew me away. It's been a while since I've read something this hefty. I have been meaning to read it 4 or 5 years at this point. I finally took it on my European vacation thinking, hey, what a good time to read a 700-page book. I didn't even get it started. I think I read like a couple chapters and then I said, oh my gosh, I'm tired, I'm going to bed. Due to my motion sickness, I didn't even try. I did get about halfway through on the plane trip home because I said I lugged this thing around for 2 weeks. I'm getting through some of it. So I did get about halfway through it and I was impressed. And then another week or two went by and I was like, I'm never gonna get to this. So I bought the audiobook. I was a little wary because a couple of other books that I've read or listened to were basically ruined by bad narration, by women, or yes, women. I was gonna say narrators, but let's be honest, women who were too old to be reading the books that they were narrating. Not that they necessarily did a bad job, but they did not properly embody the characters that they were narrating. This is a gamble, and it was a gamble that paid off. She did absolutely amazing. So I was extremely happy, but like, guys, I just started The Tea Rose, which is actually the predecessor to this. It is 24 hours long. This book, it took me 10 hours to get through half of it. So I'm in for something. I gotta say, for this book, what I didn't like was the sheer number of perspectives, particularly Shamey. I thought Shamey could have been taken out entirely, and I understood where Shamey was going. The first book, The Tea Rose, depicts Fiona Finnegan, her plight, her life. This book follows with Fiona and her now husband Joe Bristow and their growing family and their growing tea empire, but it also focuses on a young woman named India Selwyn-Jones and her struggle to find her way through the world. She is engaged to this guy named Freddie, but then she ends up falling in love with a mobster named Sid Malone. And here's a spoiler for anybody who hasn't read the first book and wants to. Sid Malone is actually Fiona's brother, Charlie. I haven't gotten enough into the Tea Rose to really see what we're going to learn about that, but in the Winter Rose, straight off the bat, we're told that Sid Malone is Charlie Finnegan, who had been presumed dead. This goes to just say, Shamey is Fiona's younger brother. He wants to be an explorer. This is something that he and this girl Willa connect on. At least he has fallen in love with her, but he is gonna go on an expedition to Antarctica. She's like, I'm not gonna wait for you. Like, would you wait for me? They do reconnect, and then we start to see them together, and it is obviously leading up to the Wild Rose, but I didn't think it was necessary. We still could have gotten to the Wild Rose without seeing an in-depth look at his burgeoning romance with Willa. And with that, the other perspective that I'm on the fence about having is Freddie's. Only because we kind of lose him. He's a really great character. He turns out to be an antagonist, if not like the villain. I really enjoyed when we first started seeing him, seeing his motivation, seeing why he's a bad guy. But then we essentially drop him in favor of India, in favor of Charlie/Sid, in favor of Shamey, in favor of almost literally every character we're introduced to. When we do pick back up, I kind of didn't care anymore. It was that same thing of, I thought we could have figured him out without having had him. But because I really enjoyed his backstory and his motivation so much, I hate to say I wish we'd never had his perspective. I just wish she'd continued, but she had so many subplots that it was overwhelming, and these subplots were maintained by the perspectives of all of her characters. Because we had Joe, we had Fiona, we had Shamey, we had India, we had Freddie, we had like a prologue with a woman named Lily, and I was like, I didn't actually know what this book was about. Surprise. So I thought that this was the woman that we were going to be focusing on for this novel, and then I reread the jacket and I was like, oh, it's not her at all, completely different names. We had a lot of that, and then we had almost like an omniscient narration. We definitely got a lot of head hopping, a lot of we're sort of with this character, but we transition and stay with this character. So there's a point where, spoiler, Joe gets shot and becomes paralyzed. India ends up saving his life. Then we pick up with him not knowing his fate until 6 years later. We open this 6-year gap in the heads of these two inconsequential characters who are seeing him coming with his wheelchair because he's involved in politics and he has all these like angry women who want women's rights behind him. Why did we need to open this way? Why did we need to be in the heads of these characters who are so unnecessary? I thought we could have pared the story down if we didn't have all these unnecessary characters, and not necessarily unnecessary subplots, because it was so well written. Everything was tied together and crafted so beautifully. But there were things that we could have done without. This book is so large. I'm 100% going to leave things out, and I'm 110% going to jump around. We open with India graduating. I really, on another tangent, I enjoyed India. I thought she was a very strong woman. This book takes place in the late 1800s. She's doing things that women were never allowed to do. Becoming a doctor. She was engaged to Freddie, but she didn't necessarily want to marry Freddie. If she did marry Freddie, she wanted to be her own person. So we open up with her, quickly meet Freddie, and he's this golden boy. We also immediately get the impression that she has loved and lost, which means that there's going to be some tension in this relationship with Freddie. As much as we want to like Freddie, we are gonna like this other guy more, this dude named Hugh. But then, almost immediately, we learn that Freddie isn't a golden boy. Like, he's not a good guy. She's at her graduation from medical school. She is expecting to be 100% alone. Her parents do not support her desire to be a doctor. So she has been cut off from the vast family fortune. And then we meet her sister Maud, who completely pointless. I thought we were gonna go somewhere with her, and we did not. So that's another character and another like subplot that we did not need, unless she shows up in the Wild Rose, which it's very possible she will. Then out of the blue, hey, there's her cousin Wish, and there's this other guy that I can't remember his name, but his brother is Freddie. Surprise, you didn't think we'd let you graduate by yourself, but that all goes to Wish, who ends up dying maybe halfway through the novel, or maybe like a quarter of the way through the novel. I liked Wish, but I don't necessarily know if we needed to have this emphasis on him, because he is by and large forgotten for the rest of the book. He does come into play at the end, which I thought it was brilliant, because as I said, Freddie, not a good dude. It seemed like he was just getting away with stuff, and it was driving me crazy. But then Donnelly brought back these mementos of his bad deeds that he kept. And I was like, okay, I think I can forgive the fact that he got away with doing bad things, because we're getting to see him and we're understanding why he's doing it, and what he's doing, and what all these little mementos signify. Let's just get back to the beginning. India, very, very wealthy, but because she wants to go her own path, her parents have disowned her. We learn about Hugh because India has a very valuable Tiffany comb in her hair, and the initials are hers, but they are not hers. They are actually her mother's. So we are linking something about this comb to Hugh, and what that is Hugh was her first love. 16, 17, 18, but he was below her in status. His dad had worked for her family. He was working for her family. His sister was working for her family. They'd grown up together. So she, her sister Maud, Hugh, his sister, whose name I can't remember, Freddie, and then his brother, they were thick as thieves. And then they start growing up and they start having grown-up emotions. India and Hugh fall in love. We learn that Freddie, who had a very difficult childhood, had fallen in love with India because she was like the only person who showed him kindness and sympathy, and this had drawn him to her. He comes back from school one year only to realize, hey, India's in love with this other guy. I don't like it. Here's a spoiler. Freddie is mentally unstable. One of his ancestors had been this really ruthless guy who killed a bunch of people, gained some status. By the time that Freddie is grown, the money has gone. And I believe it's because Freddie's father had been an alcoholic. He had not been a good guy. He had wasted their money. Freddie, he is trying to protect his sister. And this is kind of the first time that he hears his ancestor speaking to him via this picture. He ends up murdering his dad. It makes it look like an accident. Now he's grown up. He is unhappy with India and Hugh's relationship, and he's like, what can I do about it? And he starts hearing his ancestor in his head again, and he's like, well, I guess I've got to get rid of Hugh. He frames Hugh for the theft of those combs. However, what he had done was he'd given Hugh one and he had kept the other. And then Hugh had said, hey, you know what? Like, I don't have the other comb, because India's dad was like, look, if you give us both combs back, we'll drop the charges. He couldn't give the combs back, which he'd stolen in the first place because his sister had gotten pregnant and he had needed money to help her. He goes to jail and he dies. However, many years later, like, Freddie is super ambitious. He wants to be a politician. He's flat broke. His family has no money, and even if they did have money, his brother had inherited it and had given Freddie an allowance, and it was not enough for Freddie's hunger. We meet Freddie at this graduation. He seems like this really thoughtful guy, only to learn that he is only engaged to India because her mother incentivized it, said, look, you get these houses, you'll get this money, you just need to marry my daughter, and you need to get her to quit this whole doctoring business. So this entire time, he's also been cheating on her with this woman named Gemma Doyle. Gemma is also having a relationship with Sid Malone, who the authorities are gunning for. He's basically a mob boss. He's actually not that bad of a guy, though. But unforeseen circumstances landed him where he is. What he had done is, after his mother's death, she had been killed by Jack the Ripper, he felt so guilty that he had run off and encountered this thug named Sid Malone. He had ended up killing Sid, faked his own death. He tossed Sid into the river, and they looked enough alike that when Sid was discovered, that he's like, instead of going to jail for accidentally killing him, I'm just going to pretend to be him. Rises through the ranks. He does go to jail for a bit. He comes out, and then when the kingpin dies, he takes over. So he's kind of like a bad guy with a heart of gold. He is the head of what is called the firm. He is the chairman. And yeah, they are just gunning for him. Freddie, and then basically, yes, the police force, but like particularly this one corrupt officer who is in Freddie's pocket. He and his guys rob an armory. When they are getting these guns onto the ship, he ends up falling and getting very hurt. He is taken to the hospital where India saves his life, and this is the beginning of their relationship. She wants nothing to do with him because she doesn't like what he does. She has these really high morals, but what she wants to do is provide health care for the women and the children in the slums. However, she doesn't have the money for it. She does end up taking a position with this doctor, but his reputation is not who he is. And she is morally opposed to the way that he runs things. Eventually, she quits. It has to do with contraceptives. And Freddie, he has figured out that she is at this point in some sort of relationship with Sid Malone. He knows that she got these contraceptives from Sid. He orchestrates an event that gets her in a whole heap of trouble with her boss because her boss is opposed to contraceptives. She ends up quitting, and then Wish is like, okay, hey, I can help you raise money for your own clinic. I don't remember if at this point India had already broken it off with Freddie, but Wish has agreed to kind of be her money guy. There's kind of two ventures happening. One is this land that he had bought in California that he was planning on developing into the high-end resort, and then the other was managing the fund for her free clinic. She is running her free clinic currently out of the backyard of this woman named Ella, who is her best friend / secretary nurse figure at her previous job. They're running this clinic. Wish is getting money. We have a subplot with Fiona and Joe because Fiona is pregnant. She is desperate to find Charlie. Joe is opposed to this. There is a moment where they have this massive argument because she gets herself in danger, and he's like, you need to decide, your brother or me. She essentially chooses Charlie. This is at the point that he gets shot, and she's like, yeah, like I made the wrong decision. But he has gotten these political ideas because they came from nothing and built this empire. He is like, I want to help the people from whence I came. He beats Freddie out for this open political seat, and now he's making waves. Literally right after he wins the seat, Sid / Charlie's heavy guy, Frankie, shoots him. As I said, he's got a heart of gold, and he really doesn't want to live this life. So India has convinced him, hey, look, let's leave. Wish has died. He was murdered by Freddie because Freddie did not like the fact that Wish was successfully raising money for this free clinic, and this was jeopardizing Freddie's potential to marry India and have the life he's always wanted. Because while he once loved India, he loves India no longer. India has convinced Sid to leave the life. Frankie is very unhappy with this because Sid is his father figure. He frames Sid, because they look enough alike, so he frames Sid by going and shooting Joe. Around the same time, there's still the hunt for Sid Malone. Gemma has revealed that she knows that India and Sid are in a relationship, and she also knows where their hidden love nest is. she and Frankie had followed them one day and learned where they stayed. Freddie wants to get this information out of her. He ends up killing her. When he killed Hugh, or basically inadvertently killed Hugh, he kept the comb. When he killed Wish, he kept Wish's ring, at which point everything that Wish owned was like seized by his creditors or his debtors, except for the land, which went to India because she was a silent partner in it. She invested in him as he invested in her, so she does have this land. And this is where she and Sid are gonna escape to. Gemma will not tell Freddie what he wants to know. And again, he inadvertently hurts her. Like, we realize that he is a violent guy. He kind of loses his temper. He intends to throw her onto the sofa. Instead, she hits her head on a marble coffee table or some table of some sort, and she breaks her neck. So then he also frames Sid, making it look like Sid killed Gemma because of a lover's quarrel, even though they had broken up by this point. Here is the moment that everything changes, and then we fast forward 6 years. But also in this moment, Sid, he and India are gonna leave, but Sid shows up at their little love nest only to realize that the police are there and not India. He gets it in his head that India has turned him in, throws himself out of a window, goes to Fiona, who had been unsuccessful by this point of finding him. She is able to give him the medical services he needs, and then she and Shamey help him fake his death again, at which point he then goes to Africa. India is pregnant, and she's like, what is a girl to do? She runs to Freddie and she says, hey, I've got a proposition for you. You want my money? I need my child to be legitimate, so let's get married. By this point, I have started to not care for India. I thought she was really weak by this point. Like, all of her fire and drive had diminished. Then Freddie says, all right, yeah, I have terms. And one of those terms is that you have to stop practicing medicine. By this point, they have their free clinic underway. They've had enough money that they have a building, they're making the repairs, like they're getting ready, and she no fight whatsoever. Like, she's like, okay. And I was like, who are you? Both she and Sid have misconceptions of each other, what each other has done, and what the truth is. But I did not understand why India went from being this really strong woman to someone who's basically extremely defeated, and she just wouldn't stand up for herself or what she wanted. I could understand her losing in the end, but she didn't even put up a fight. We open up 6 years later. Joe has survived, but now he is handicapped. He is still a crusader. He had initially had to give up his seat, but then he was able to win it back when he was stronger. Sid is in Africa. He is working on a coffee plantation for this woman named Maggie. India is still married to Freddie. He is living his own life. It is a very unhappy marriage. He cannot stand her daughter, Charlotte. They are headed to Africa themselves, because this is like when Africa is really starting to get developed by the British. You see the tension in their marriage, which again made me dislike India because she holds the money. Her parents are gone by this point, and I just kept waiting for her to use this as leverage. Like, okay, if you're going to treat my kid this way, I guess this is what I'm going to do. It is perhaps because it's a societal thing that women had no power. And so maybe it never occurred to her, or maybe she just knew there was no point in it. But I was like, why are you just giving in to Freddie? Sure, he makes great points, but why are you just giving in? Which, on another note, this novel shocked me in many ways. It was relatively gritty. One of the things that happened is Freddie trying to get India to marry him, he's like, just sleep with me, because if he gets her pregnant, then she's stuck. She doesn't love him, which it also in the beginning made me feel better when I realized like she doesn't actually love him, because I was already rooting for Hugh. But I guess for propriety's sake or whatever, she's still gonna go through with the marriage, which I guess is kind of the beginning of the end for our relationship, because I didn't understand her thought process, only because it did not align with her characterization. In any case, he finally gets her to sleep with him, and it is essentially unconsensual. I do not understand why she let it happen. You knew she didn't want to, yet it's kind of like she was just resigned to the fact that this is what was gonna happen. He, in present time, is still trying to get her pregnant. She acknowledges the fact that he's sterile. It is not gonna happen. He continues to come to her room, and I mean, this is not explicit whatsoever. It's just explicitly stated that by both parties, that he comes to her room and nobody enjoys it. And she's not getting pregnant. They're going to Africa because he's still trying to make a name for himself. He's still trying to rise in the ranks. And he's like, we need to go to Africa and show everybody what a great place this is, what a great opportunity it is. And this, for me, was a little confusing and a little weak, because we all know that she's gonna run into Charlie. It's just gonna happen. But we got all these instances at the same time. Shamey and Willa are coming because they want to hike Kilimanjaro. We're told about how like both groups are gonna have a guide. Charlie was the one that was initially wanted for India and Freddie, but he had learned that they were coming to town. He was like, I'm getting out of here. I'm not gonna take them anywhere. But I was also like, okay, so after he learns about that, he answers an ad for somebody who needs a guide. So now I'm thinking, oh, well, he's gonna be reunited with Shamey. No, Shamey has this whole other thing going on that has nothing to do with Charlie. And I thought it was a missed opportunity. We'll go with Shamey. He and Willa are falling in love. They have all those like really tropey, we're supposed to have 2 rooms, but now we're in 1 and we have to share a bed moments. And he cannot bring himself to tell her he loves her, because he's under the impression that she is in love or in a relationship with this other guy. We all knew, based on perspectives and, reading the room, she was playing it up in front of Shamey. But I actually thought she'd be like, in the end, like, why would I be with him? He likes dudes. That is not what happens. They link up with their guide. Somehow they link up with these other natives, and their guide is like, don't trust them. They're not good. We just need to leave that alone. But Shamey's like, oh no, they're fine. They get to Kilimanjaro. All the crew stay kind of at a base camp. He and Willa go up, do what they need to do. They declare their love for each other. They're so deliriously happy that they are not as aware as they need to be. The ice at some point was weak, had melted, whatever. There's a rock fall. There's some kind of an avalanche. Willa gets caught in it and is gravely injured. Shamey decides to go back to their base camp because he's like, they can help get you down. He gets there. It's like an 8-hour walk, mind you, only to discover that the indigenous peoples had turned on his guide and his people and like murdered them, and now they were all being eaten by wild animals. It's not bad in theory, but we did not have enough time. 700-page book. We had no more time for that. Like, it was a story unto itself. Honestly, I thought that this whole book could have ended when Charlie escapes and goes to Africa, and we could have had a whole other book. That's all I have to say about that. In any case, we are in Africa. Willa, like, she's in bad shape. Shamey ends up, like, 5-day walk gets her to the bottom of the mountain. He is able to flag down a train that takes them somewhere where the doctor is like, I'm gonna have to amputate this leg. And again, I'm here thinking, India is in this town. or nearby, and she's a very skilled doctor, even though she's not currently practicing. And I keep thinking she's gonna show up, and then Willa's leg is gonna be fine. And no, absolutely not. Shamey has to make the difficult decision: let Willa die or have her leg amputated. And Willa is like, let me die. I will have no life if I cannot adventure. He decides to have her leg amputated. Willa ends up leaving him. And she's like, I love you, but I hate you, so bye. Back over in India and Charlie's storyline, the family is on safari. Charlotte wanders off. It's, been a day or two, and a guide is sought for. So they get Charlie, and he's like, I don't really want to get involved with this, but I will because it's India and it is her child. He does end up filing. He ends up finding Charlotte. He brings her somewhere else, drops her off so that he never actually comes face to face with India. But eventually they do come face to face, and what a shocker. They work out their kinks and their misunderstandings of, like, India never turned him over to the police and all this other stuff. And then Freddie shows up. Well, not literally shows up, but Freddie, because as I said, he wants India to get pregnant, he starts noticing that she's acting funny. And he's like, oh, she's pregnant, but she's trying to get rid of the baby by taking all these really long horse rides. When in actuality, no, she's just going to see Charlie or something. Then he rides out in the direction that she tends to go, and he ends up at Maggie's farm. He sees Charlie, and now there we go. He turns Charlie over to the authorities. Charlie is in jail. This is when Shamey shows back up, because then I think he sees it in the newspaper. So he and Maggie team up. They break Charlie out of jail. Simultaneously, India has come home and finds Charlotte playing in Freddie's office. She's not supposed to be here. She accidentally has knocked over Freddie's music box. This music box that has so much to do with that murderous ancestor and this music that connects him to his childhood. And it's kind of the way that he, like, self-soothes and simmers and, like, thinks about all of his evil doings. And it also has a hidden bottom where he keeps all of his treasures, all of his tokens from the people that he has murdered. India finds these, and she puts the pieces together. She then decides that she and Charlotte are going to get out of there. But as I said, the jewelry box had been broken. And so even though in the moment she was able to deceive him as to why she was in the office, as soon as he picks up that music box, he's going to know something's wrong, which he did. So then he catches her as she tries to retrieve the music box when she's trying to escape. He takes both her and Charlotte into the desert. He drops them into an animal pit. This, I mean, again, like, honestly, this novel was brilliant. It was fantastic. But we needed so much more from Africa. It was a story unto itself. They're in the pit. Charlotte, so on the way, Freddie had thrown the music box in the river. So this is another one of those moments where I was like, holy cow, India, like, do something. Like, why does Freddie keep getting away with stuff? What happens is Charlotte had actually taken all of those tokens out. A lion comes to this pit, and she throws the other comb at the lion. So once Charlie gets out of jail, he goes to see India, only to learn that nobody has seen them all day long. He tracks them down, and he finds them because this comb is glinting in the sunlight, so he saves them. Meanwhile, or sort of previously, Freddie has devised this plot to say, hey, look, we went on a family outing, we got separated, I don't know what happened to them, they're gonna be declared dead, he gets all the money. He decides to make it look real, he needs to wander the desert for a little while. He is hanging around his fire one night, and all of a sudden, he starts hearing hyenas. It was too simple for me, too kind of out of left field. Like, he didn't get the justice he necessarily deserved, in my opinion. I thought it was a creative way for him to die, but I needed more. I needed more lead up and development to his death. There had been no mentions of hyenas, no real idea as to kind of what dangers, like, yes, we know the desert, we know Africa can be dangerous. There's a lot of wild animals, but we don't know if Freddie is a good shot. We don't know if Freddie is afraid of the desert. We don't know his strengths, his weaknesses. We don't know the things that we should start getting scared or worried or concerned about. Although, honestly, yes, this little hyena scene was quite, not scary, but it was frightening. It was very ominous. He hears a hyena and he's like, okay, well, I know how to combat this. And then he cuts himself and he's like, hyenas, they can smell blood. Let me take care of that. And then all of a sudden the hyenas are just there and they are all over him. And then this like mother hyena is ripping his chest out. Like, it's really gory. It's quite amazing. Like, I loved it. But I was like, where did this come from? He was seeing no justice whatsoever. And then all of a sudden he dies. I mean, I get it. He was scheming. So, okay, yes, he deserved to die. It was a great time for him to die, but it came out of nowhere. Like, there was no foreshadowing. Charlie has run across the body and he's the one that alerts people that Freddie had died. India does then let people know that Freddie was behind all of these deaths, which on that point, Joe, when he woke up from his coma, he fingered Frankie. He said, Frankie's the guy that shot me, not Freddie. And so after all of these years, it still doesn't sit well with him about Charlie/Sid having killed Gemma. But he sees how sad Fiona is over the loss of her brother. Even though, you know, she knows he's not dead, but like the figurative and slightly physical loss or literal loss of her brother. He's like, I want to clear Charlie's name. So he goes to Frankie in jail, and Frankie, I think, is dying from tuberculosis, which I liked Frankie in the same way that I liked Freddie, that when we were in his head, we saw what made him tick, but I didn't need Frankie. I didn't need Frankie as a point of view character. Joe ends up getting Frankie to tell him that he was in Gemma's apartment the day she died. He saw Freddie kill her. Now Joe is on the warpath to get Frankie's name cleared for at least that one murder. Not Frankie. Well, sort of, because people think that Frankie also killed Gemma. So all of this information about Freddie comes out and the truth behind his misdeeds. I would have liked to have seen something about the dirty cop, because he had risen through the ranks too, and we never saw him get any kind of comeuppance. Again, that was something that was heavily emphasized in the first 3/4 of the novel. And then once we go to Africa, he's never seen or heard from again, except for like a passing mention. Charlie in India is distraught. She goes to Fiona, and Joe already knew that Charlotte was Charlie's because he had talked to Ella, but she had sworn him to secrecy. She's like, you cannot tell anybody. So he had never told Fiona. India goes, she tells Fiona, and then she's like, but Charlie wants nothing to do with me. Like, why else would he have left after he rescued me? Like, he's upset with me. Fiona doesn't quite believe this, but there's no other explanation for it. What happens is Charlie had given Charlotte a note, but Charlotte, who is another point of view character once we get to Africa, and I didn't think we needed it. She is highly sensitive to her mother's emotions, and she, growing up, has noticed that her mother could get really sad. So she did not want to give her mother this note because she did not want it to make her sad. She ends up giving the note to her mom. It basically tells India that Charlie will make his way to her. They'll meet up in that land in California. So now we have this epilogue. We are in this California town in the head of a random townsperson being given the down low on Charlotte and India and their habits living in this town, and the fact that they've been there for, I don't know, an odd year or so, and how every day they go to the train station, and he and she had called each other, or called themselves the Baxters. So how Mrs. Baxter is always going to the train station, waiting for Mr. Baxter to arrive, and like nobody believes that he exists and that this lady is just crazy. But it just so happens that on this day, Sid/Charlie does show up. He's gone through the ringer. I don't know why. Knowing me, I had skipped ahead, so I knew this was coming. So I kept expecting, okay, so when he threw himself out of the window when the police tried to get him for Joe Bristow's shooting, I was like, okay, so this is when he gets hurt. No. So maybe it's all this backbreaking work on the coffee farm. No. So maybe once they arrest him, or re-arrest him once Freddie turns him in and he goes to jail and he, gets hurt. No. So I have no idea, except that we know it took a lot for him to get across Africa and over the ocean to California. I could have used some more. And on that note, I don't know if this is something I'm going to get to see in the Tea Rose. But we learn very graphic things about what Charlie endured while he was in prison as a young man before he became Sid Malone. While they did make the novel better, they made it more real, I didn't like it. Maybe it's because I'm too sensitive. Maybe because there's just some things I do not want in my head. I understand this is why he's standoffish in certain ways and why he's so secretive, but I could have gone without learning some of those secrets. So I'm interested to see what we learn in the Tea Rose. With all of that, these books are not for the faint of heart. They probably will appeal more to a female viewership, but they're pretty gritty. I didn't think so much hanky-panking was going to be going on. I didn't think there'd be so much language. I didn't think there would be so much nefarious business going on. I thought there'd be a lot more Victorian sensibilities, but it was a great book. I am very impressed. As I said, it was really long, but I do recommend it. Have you read any of these books? Have you read anything by Jennifer Donnelly? What is your favorite historical fiction novel or series? Well, with that, I will see you later.